It's 7 p.m. Friday, September 20th, and these are the top stories at this hour. Another typhoon is nearing the Korean peninsula less than 2 weeks after the powerful Typhoon Ling made landfall in the country. Typhoon Tapah is expected to move fast towards the peninsula, bringing heavy rain to the southern regions starting tonight. North Korea and the U.S. are expected to restart their nuclear talks later this month. Experts are saying there is a way forward that will involve cooperation between the two Koreas, a new approach by the U.S. and potential sanctions relief. 2 more suspected cases of African swine fever are reported near the inter-Korean border. South Korean health authorities are conducting tests to make sure. And the Japanese government says it will accept South Korea's request to hold bilateral talks over Tokyo's trade curbs against Seoul. This comes after South Korea filed a complaint to the WTO saying Japan's move was politically motivated. News Center begins now. Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Noah. Our top story this evening: Korea's bracing for yet another typhoon following the powerful Typhoon Ling earlier this month, which left 3 people dead. The latest storm will not be as strong as Ling, but it will still bring heavy rain and strong winds. Our Jong-un has the latest.
Typhoon Tapah is heading towards the Korean peninsula. It was reported on Thursday evening that the typhoon is near Okinawa, Japan, and is expected to reach Jeju Island on Sunday afternoon. The Korea Meteorological Administration forecasts Typhoon Tapah to then pass over the southern city of Tongyeong before moving out towards Dokdo Island and the East Sea. Tapah is expected to gather strength as it passes through a warm stretch of ocean. The Korean peninsula will feel the effects of the typhoon from Friday evening as Jeju Island will start to see some rainfall. The rain will then drench the southern Korean provinces, impacting even the lower regions of Gangwon-do province as it moves towards the East Sea. The downpours are likely to spread across the rest of the country, including Seoul, and will continue until Monday. The rainfall will get stronger from Sunday, where 30 to 50 millimeters per hour is expected to pour down on the southern coast. Wind speeds of 110 to 145 kilometers per hour are expected in Jeju Island and near the southern coast, but the winds won't be as strong as Typhoon Ling. High waves along coastal areas could cause damage, and residents in those areas are advised to be prepared for some flooding as well. It's also harvest season, so the Rural Development Administration is in full alert. The state's agricultural agency advises farmers to fix the waterway and tree branches before the heavy rain. Jong-un, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's top nuclear envoy says North Korea and the United States are very close to resuming nuclear negotiations and are communicating through their dialogue channel. Jong-un, who is in Washington, also says the North is now more focused on getting a security guarantee from the U.S. rather than sanctions relief. Oh Jung-hee reports.
South Korea's nuclear envoy expects North Korea and the United States to resume their nuclear negotiations within this month. Arriving in Washington for talks with his U.S. counterpart and other officials, Seoul Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Lee Do-hoon told reporters.
On September 9th, the North's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee said Pyongyang is returning to talks. Therefore, the talks are likely to take place soon.
He added the so-called New York Channel is always open, so the North and the U.S. can communicate whenever they want to. The New York Channel refers to discussions between the North Korean mission to the UN and the U.S. State Department. Seoul's nuclear envoy highlighted that the U.S. wants to first sit down with North Korea and have a candid dialogue on what exactly the regime wants. Since April, Pyongyang has been demanding that Washington come up with what it calls a new calculation. That new calculation has been thought as sanctions relief, but earlier this week, a senior North Korean diplomat wrote in a statement that the regime wants a security guarantee.
Recently, North Korea has shifted its focus from lifting sanctions to getting a security guarantee. We are communicating and analyzing a lot with the U.S.
The U.S. has recently been signaling North Korea that it's ready to talk, with its nuclear envoy continuously stressing that Washington is willing to be flexible in these negotiations. President Trump also said Wednesday that a new method could be very good for talks in North Korea, criticizing his former national security advisor John Bolton and the so-called Libyan model he promoted. 우정희, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea reacted to President Trump's recent comments on what he called finding a new method in nuclear talks with the North and confirmed its new counterpart, a U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun. Kim Myung-gil, the North's former ambassador to Vietnam, released a statement earlier this morning announcing himself as the North's new point man in working-level talks with the U.S. Kim praised President Trump's remarks that criticized the Libyan model of denuclearization and suggested a new method to improve relations with the North. He said he expects the U.S. to make the right calculations and that he wants to be optimistic about the upcoming talks. It's been about a year since the two Koreas promised to lower military tensions and engage in joint economic projects. Those promises have yielded little so far, but as our Hong Yu reports, it's widely hoped that peaceful ties will eventually lead to progress.
It was when the two Koreas held a groundbreaking ceremony to link and modernize their railways and roads that Inter-Korean Economic Cooperation took a big step forward after the September 19th Pyongyang Joint Declaration. South Korea hoped that connecting their railways and roads would bring peace and prosperity to Northeast Asia and expand its economic reach into the Asian continent. But the next step was impeded by the failure of the Hanoi summit between North Korea and the U.S. because building transport links would have to go in tandem with North Korea's denuclearization. Since then, there has been no progress on any of the two Koreas' main projects: the transport links, reopening the Inter-Korean Factory Park at Kaesong, or tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgangsan. But experts say there are ways to get things going.
So once North Korea dismantles Yongbyon facility, and then I believe they will be, each side of bargaining partner will be able to gain some kind of certain level of trust to each other. And then after that, the United States and the international community, including South Korea, will be able to release some part, not all, of the sanctions against North Korea. At that stage of the bargaining of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, then they will be able to aim at more ambitious goals in the future.
And such ambitious goals can be achieved through the peace economy, a key policy goal of the Moon Jae-in administration. Officials in the government say peace and prosperity form a virtuous circle, each reinforcing the other.
Instability in terms of peace hurts the overall economy in areas such as industry and capital markets. So economic prosperity can be maximized if it's based on peace. The same goes the other way around. When we have achieved high level of economic cooperation and have built a common understanding, this is what requires the two sides to contain any conflict. So it serves as an opportunity to consolidate peace.
To build lasting peace, the Unification Ministry will continue to review the information shared with North Korea regarding their economic cooperation to find ways to make progress. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
With the North Korea-U.S. talks expected to start again soon, a renowned nuclear scientist says cooperation is the key when it comes to dealing with North Korea and the denuclearization process. Our Oh Soo-young sat down with Dr. Sigrid Hecker for an Arirang News exclusive.
Boosting inter-Korean cooperation through a tailored sanctions relief could break the impasse on denuclearization. That's according to Sigrid Hecker, a nuclear scientist at Stanford University who has been to North Korea 7 times since 2004.
Tailored sanctions relief, I call them tailored to encourage North-South interaction. Not necessarily to drop all UN sanctions, but you could encourage, through tailored sanctions relief, North and South cooperation. And so some economic benefits, economic traction, with reducing the risk on the nuclear side with real steps and rolling back. That's what's going to develop the trust to hopefully, get to the end point of the elimination of nuclear weapons.
Hecker's research indicates that while the North has substantially reduced its nuclear activities compared to 2017, the regime has continued producing fissile material at Yeonbyeong complex. He estimates it has enough bomb fuel to produce around 40 nuclear weapons.
Earlier this year, North Korea offered to dismantle its Yeonbyeong nuclear complex, which critics have said simply isn't enough. But you've been to Yeonbyeong complex 4 times since 2004, and you've said that it would actually be a significant step. So should this be something that the United States reconsiders, perhaps?
That's exactly where I would go back to, is to see what can be done as far as Yeonbyeong, and particularly to take those facilities that have the direct weapons relevance and start to roll those back. It's not the whole nuclear weapons program, but all the plutonium, all the tritium is made in Yeonbyeong, and shutting that down, eliminating that capability is a big deal. We should go there.
You said in your report that it may take about 10 years for North Korea to fully denuclearize. Well, what are some ways that they could speed up the process?
So what I had proposed is, why don't we see if we engage the North Korea in what I call cooperative conversion of its nuclear program. In other words, suppose you could actually get the North Koreans to work with you to say, well, there's some parts of perhaps the nuclear enterprise that could be retained that is strictly civilian. Perhaps instead of missile tests, the North Koreans could actually have peaceful space launches. Perhaps those could actually be done cooperatively with South Korea. Now, once you get the spirit of cooperation, then verification becomes much easier, and you could actually shrink that timeline. But to take those steps towards cooperative takes risk.
Given the high level of distrust between the North and the US, Hecker advocates a phased approach to denuclearization through a halt, rollback, and finally elimination. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly replied to a message he got earlier this month from Chinese President Xi Jinping congratulating North Korea on the 71st anniversary of its founding. The North state media said Kim mentioned the summits he had with Xi, saying the leaders were able to show the world their determination to strengthen their country's friendship, something he called a strategic choice. Kim also expressed gratitude for the support of the Chinese ruling party and the government. Kim's reply is seen as a way for the North to demonstrate its strong ties with its ally China. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa toured 2 U.S. military bases in South Korea earlier today, Camp Humphreys and the Osan Air Base, and met with U.S. Forces Korea Commander Robert Abrams. She was accompanied by the U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Harry Harris. The Foreign Ministry said the tour was part of efforts to reaffirm the 2 countries' alliance. Now, there had been concerns relations had been damaged when Seoul refused Washington's call for a military intel sharing pact with Japan to be renewed. Kang also emphasized the need for close coordination for peace and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula during a luncheon held with 20 Air Force personnel from the 2 countries. South Korea and the U.S. are launching negotiations on defense cost sharing as early as next week in Seoul. A South Korean military source confirmed today that James Dehart of the U.S. State Department will lead the U.S. delegation. Seoul is still carrying out internal procedures to select its chief negotiator. President Trump has been trying to pressure South Korea to shoulder more costs. Under this year's Special Measures Agreement, a defense cost-sharing deal that expires at the end of the year, Seoul had agreed to pay nearly $875 million, an increase of more than 8% from the previous year. Following the government's confirmation of 2 African swine fever cases in Paju and Yeoncheon earlier this week, 2 more farms in Paju reported a suspected outbreak of the disease this morning. 3 pigs died in the 2 farms, both of which are located within 10 kilometers of the farm in Yeoncheon, where the second case was confirmed on Wednesday. Inspections are underway, with the results due to be announced in the coming hours. African swine fever is highly contagious and lethal to pigs, but is harmless to humans. The exact origin of the outbreak is still under investigation. Japan has agreed to discuss Korea's complaint filed at the WTO over Tokyo's export curbs against Seoul. The complaint was handed in 9 days ago. Now they have 60 days to reach an agreement. If they don't, Seoul can then request a WTO panel ruling. South Korea claims Japan's export curbs are politically motivated and discriminatory, while Japan says they're only meant to properly manage its exports. Analysts say it's unlikely they'll overcome their differences and that a WTO panel ruling cannot be avoided. Korea's Director General for Asian and Pacific Affairs, Kim Jong-un, met his new Japanese counterpart for the first time today in Tokyo. They exchanged views on a range of bilateral issues, including Korea's Supreme Court ruling against Japan's wartime forced labor. Seoul's foreign ministry said Kim explained to Shigeki Takizaki that Seoul respects the court's ordering of Japanese firms to compensate Korean forced laborers during Japan's colonial rule. He also urged Tokyo to pull back its retaliatory economic curbs against Korea and resolve the issue through dialogue. The two directors are also thought to have discussed a possible meeting between the nation's foreign ministers on the sidelines of next week's UN General Assembly in New York. If organized, it will be Kang Kyung-hwa's first meeting with Japan's newly appointed Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi. The chairman of Korea's third largest conglomerate, SK Group, says the company needs to find ways to adjust to what he sees as an unprecedented geopolitical crisis. Choi Tae-won was speaking Thursday at an SK event in Washington, D.C., where he told reporters that his firm expects this geopolitical crisis to last for the next 30 years. It was not exactly clear what situation he was referring to. But regarding Japan's export curbs on South Korea, he said SK needs to look for alternative ways to source semiconductor parts and materials, such as working with Korean manufacturers. South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi is suggesting that Seoul should consider whether to maintain the preferential trade treatment it gives to some developing countries, because the fact that it doesn't give others the same benefits is raising questions at the World Trade Organization. This is the first time he's raised the possibility of changing that arrangement. Hong said the government will put South Korea's national interests first, analyzing internal and external trends and the effects such a change could have on the local economy. He insisted any change would not affect deals already in place, but would shape decisions on future deals. South Korea's finance ministry says the country's exports and investment remain sluggish due to the slowing global economy and worsening market conditions in the manufacturing sector. According to the ministry's monthly economic report released today, Korea's facility investment and construction investment fell 7% and 3.5% respectively in August compared to the same period last year. In addition, exports also tumbled 13.6% on year last month, extending its downturn to 9 months in a row. In its report, the ministry described the local economy as, quote, sluggish for 6 straight months, the longest since March 2005. Officials from the government and private sector held in-depth discussions on the future of the Korean economy at an economic conference in Seoul earlier today. Our Yoon Jung-min tells us what was discussed.
Innovation, future technology, and fairness are the deciding factors of South Korea's economic future. That was the core message of the inaugural Conference on Future and Strategy of Korea, which served as a platform for discussions with the private sector to seek ways to boost the slowing economy amid uncertainties both at home and abroad.
It's important to raise our economy's growth potential. For that, I want to emphasize 3 factors: structural reforms, leading the fourth industrial revolution, and finding future growth engines.
In the discussions, which will be reflected in the Finance Ministry's long-term policy plan, many experts say Korea should allocate more funds and human resources to nurture future technologies such as robots, AI, and biotechnology. Some say robots could be the answer to the country's labor shortages, brought about by a shrinking population. Creating a fair economy was also one of the key topics at the forum, centered around addressing the income gap and ensuring a more even wealth distribution.
The keys are innovation, inclusiveness, and fairness. We should deal with the limits of quantitative growth through innovation, fix market system flaws through policy action, and create a fair economy to address inequality.
On the environmental front, the panel stressed the importance of using more renewable energy instead of fossil fuels for the sake of both the environment and the economy. Under the theme of gathering hope for a new future, the Future Strategy Conference hopes to propose ways to help the Korean economy prepare against global uncertainties and seek future growth engines. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Korea's traditional markets seem to be suffering amid the emergence of more big commercial retailers. However, some small merchants have found ways to coexist with large supermarkets. Our Kim Bo-kyung had a chance to meet these stores.
Small retailers have struggled to compete with large retailers and supermarkets in the past, but now they are starting to find ways to coexist with their larger rivals. Sunine 빈대떡 in Gwangjang Market is selling its mung-bean pancakes to E-Mart, one of the nation's largest supermarkets. It grabbed an opportunity to launch a pop-up store in a department store, and this led to the interest by E-Mart. Other stores have started using online platforms and social media services. According to the Statistics Korea, online shopping turnover this July was more than $9 billion, which is around a 15% increase on year. Fruit shop Gwangjin and Korean side dish shop Hongnim decided to make the most of this trend.
My kids uploaded our market stall on Instagram and Naver, and the business is doing much better because our products can be delivered to customers.
Hongnim even appeared on the TV program Street Food by media streaming service Netflix.
A lot of people liked us and praised us on internet and by SNS. I think that is why Netflix came to us. Westerners didn't try traditional Korean foods before, but since then they try them out more often. It actually helps boost sales.
Thanks to online platforms and SNS, traditional markets are fast becoming tourist spots for foreigners who come to enjoy Korean foods.
Oh, they are amazing, actually. The food is so nice here and the market is so nice. I loved it. And the color is so nice. I haven't tasted, but I will try to taste some of them.
The Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises is planning various ways to support these small retailers. It launched a campaign on Friday under the slogan of Buy Value, Live Together to promote traditional markets. The Minister of SMEs and Startups laid out supporting plans for small retailers in South Korea.
We decided to connect K-food, K-culture, and K-beauty all together. Under the name of Brand K, we would like to promote Korea's traditional products from small and medium-sized firms to the world. Until now, we have mainly supported offline stores and modernizing traditional markets, but from now on, we will start focusing on supporting online shops.
By adapting to the latest consumer trends and broadening their customer base, these small retailers at traditional markets have found a way to exist side by side with their larger competitors. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
RM, the leader of K-pop boy band BTS, has donated $84,000 to students with hearing impairments. According to a special school for students with hearing impairments in Seoul, he made the donation on Monday, a few days after his birthday. The donation was made in the hope of providing ways for students to enjoy music despite their difficulty. The school plans to use the money to expand its music curriculum and create more chances for students to engage in musical performances. BTS recently finished their first long-term vacation and will start their world tour, which will start in Saudi Arabia on October 11th and end in Seoul on the 29th. The population of South Korea is rapidly getting older, meaning there are more senior citizens struggling with dementia. There is no cure yet, but there are ways to reduce the risk and detect it early. Our Choi Si-young has the details.
Dementia covers a broad category of brain diseases. Alzheimer's disease is the most common among them. Health authorities say Alzheimer's disease makes up the majority of cases, followed by vascular dementia and other degenerative diseases. The first sign of early Alzheimer's is when you begin to experience forgetfulness associated with aging. But simple memory lapses do not necessarily mean dementia. If you're confused when expressing your thoughts, performing complex tasks, or traveling alone to unfamiliar places, this means a decline in cognition and thus the onset of dementia.
If I give you a hint and you recall whatever you forgot, it could be a natural memory lapse. But if you still cannot remember even after the hint, it could be a sign of early dementia. If you have dementia, you will also have problems communicating, calculating things, or navigating the roads.
Experts say people severely hard of hearing are 4 times more likely to develop dementia than other people.
We hear and learn from the outside world. Hearing stimulates our brain, but if we can't hear, there's no stimulation. If we can't talk, we remain disconnected and alone. We spend less time using our brain and dementia begins to develop.
Health professionals recommend eating healthily and paying attention to the warning signs of dementia. This means eating low-fat meat along with fish and vegetables and being mindful of forgetting daily routines such as taking pills. Doctors also say caregivers should let dementia patients do things for themselves rather than have caregivers do everything for them. 최시영, Arirang News.
The 2019 Gwangju International Art Fair is now underway. Galleries usually take part in this type of event, but Gwangju's art fair is distinctive in its policy of providing booths for individual artists. Our Kan Young-hoo reports.
Back for its 10th edition, the Gwangju International Art Fair, or Art Gwangju 19, is doing things a little bit differently. Unlike most art fairs, the Gwangju International Art Fair gives artists their own spaces to display their works. Some 80 artists are showing off their artwork at the fair. The art fair is giving local artists their own space because some artists who don't belong to a gallery often have less opportunities to exhibit their works.
So far, critics have been saying that we have very high-quality works. And the art fair is not only to show the latest trends, but also to provide chances for consumers to buy the artwork. We hope this event can grow bigger and bigger so that later on, it is highly anticipated.
As well as the independent artist booth, 91 galleries, including international ones from 13 countries like the U.S., Germany, Japan, and Peru, are exhibiting their work to the visitors.
I want to learn how audience can respond to my installation based on all the different social, cultural media that's happening in Korea. So even for me, this is a learning process.
Taking place at the Kim Dae-jung Convention Center in the southwestern city of Gwangju, the art fair will run through Sunday. The one-day admission fee is 5,000 won, or about $4 per person. Kan Young-hoo, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Cody Lee, a 22-year-old Korean-American who is blind and has autism, has been crowned the winner of NBC's America's Got Talent. Lee will receive $1 million in prize money and will be headlining shows at the Paris Hotel Casino in Las Vegas from November 7th to the 10th. Lee sang 2 songs in his final performance for the show, including a duet with 3-time Grammy Award nominee Leona Lewis. Following the win, Lee described the experience as, quote, unbelievable and amazing, with his mother standing closely by his side. It is that time now where we take a look at some of Arirang's digital media content, and Andi News is back, taking a look at the top trending stories.
달달한 향기.
편리함? 담배 대체제? 담배는 니코틴과 타르 뭐 여러 가지 안 좋은 유해 물질이 많다고 했는데 근데 전자담배는 니코틴 하나?
일반 담배랑 하는데 냄새는 안 나는 그래서 조금 더 매너가 있는 담배? 네.
달달하고 그러니까 일단 기분은 순할 것 같고 괜찮을 것 같아요.
뭔가 괜찮을 것 같고 향도 잘 안 나고 좋은 냄새 난다고 했는데 그게 오히려 건강에 더 안 좋다고 들었어요.
전자담배는 어떤 목적성을 가지고 그런 성분이 나오게끔 만들었으니까 실질적으로는 좀 더 독하지 않을까라고 그냥 생각했거든요.
어쨌든 전자담배도 담배의 대체제긴 한데 그것도 건강에 안 좋다고 하니까 그냥 끊는 게 낫지 않을까.
모든 국민이 끊을 수 있었으면 좋겠습니다.
Typhoon Tapah is tracking through the sea south of the peninsula and is forecast to cross the Strait of Korea by Sunday. For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Centre. Michelle.
Now, Typhoon Tapah will be close enough to bring rain to Jeju Island starting tonight. According to the typhoon's trajectory, it will affect the southern regions throughout the early mornings of Saturday and the central region by Saturday night. So the country will see the heaviest rain on Sunday, and by Monday, the typhoon will be out into the East Sea and continue its way towards Japan. Now, this typhoon will be accompanied by some strong winds, but heavy rain will be a bigger problem. The Jeju Island and the eastern coast will see the most precipitation with up to 400 millimeters until Monday. Now, the capital will only receive light rain of up to 40 millimeters. Now, keep in mind of the big temperature drops during the mornings and nights as well. The morning lows are looking similar to today, mostly at around 16 to 20 degrees Celsius. And into the day, Seoul will top out to 26 degrees, while the rainstorm will keep the mercury from rising in the south. Daegu and Gwangju barely reaching up to 20 degrees Celsius. Now, I hope you have a safe weekend and a dry one as well. Now, I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Okay, that will wrap it up for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you as always for watching, and stay tuned for News in Depth coming up next.
2019 has been a big year for international diplomacy in Korea, and there are profound exchanges happening between different nations every day. With a focus on cooperation and exchange, the show seeks to reinforce relations